Greetings, fellow cultivators. Welcome to Autonova. Remember to like and subscribe to support the journey. Now, let's dive into the next chapter of A Will Eternal. The fighting was getting more bitter than ever. Of course, the casualties on the Sky River Court side far outmatched those of the river-defying sect. People were being injured or killed almost every moment, leading to taciturn silence within the Sky River Court itself. In the very center of the Sky River Court was a tree growing upon the larger tree. At the crown of that smaller tree was a log cabin, outside of which stood an old man in a white robe, who was looking out at the fighting. The booms and screams of battle were clearly audible from his position. He seemed completely exhausted, and if one were to look closely at him, an aura of death could be detected. He seemed to be on the verge of breathing his last breath. Next to the old man was a handsome boy with rosy lips and white teeth. He was almost pretty, and even emanated a fragrant aroma. He wore fresh, clean clothes, and almost looked like a celestial creature of some sort. He had his hands clasped behind his back as he studied the battlefield. He seemed particularly interested in Bai Xiaochun. After a long moment passed, the old man spoke in a voice hoarse from exhaustion. "Fellow Taoist Li, haven't things gone on long enough?" The boy smiled and looked over at the old man. "Oh no, not quite yet." He sighed. "Fellow Taoist Chen, if you had known things would turn out this way, would you have repented of your sins earlier?" The old man stood there quietly for a moment. Then his eyes went a bit dimmer, and he said, "When will enough be enough? Plenty of people have died already." After a moment of thought, the boy smiled and said, "Fine, fine. How about this? Produce your Sky River Court reserve power. Once it's destroyed, we can end the punishment." The old man seemed to tire even further. Many people had actually come to assume that he was dead already. However, as the true patriarch of the Sky River Court, this old man was in the Diva realm, and had numerous means by which to prolong his life, even after receiving a grievous injury. Despite being like an oil lamp about to wink out, he was still able to continue living. The Starry Sky Tao Polarity sect didn't want to completely eradicate the Sky River Court. Rather, they wanted this old man to watch it being destroyed. They wanted him to understand that this was his punishment. Only after enough cultivators had died could the remaining disciples have a chance to keep on living. The old man sighed, and then reached out and tapped the tree trunk next to him. The tree shivered, and the effect rapidly spread out. In the blink of an eye, the entire dire sky banyan was shaking. Then, countless white insects began to crawl out from inside of the tree. Each insect was only about the size of a finger, but they let out piercing cries, along with powerful auras. As soon as they appeared, they began to fly up into the sky. This development caused an immediate stir. The fighting stopped momentarily as swarms of the creatures flew up out of the dire sky banyan. It only took moments before they blotted out the sky. It was a completely hair-raising sight. Among the cultivators of the Sky River Court, only a few recognized what those insects were, and when they did, looks of terror appeared on their faces. The entire sect was filled with white insects, and the droning sound they caused as they flew up. Everyone looked on in shock as the countless bugs flew up, creating a sea of insects. If a sea of insects were all there were to it, it might not be a big deal. But these bugs were clumping together, and before long, they had created the shape of a vicious, gargantuan beetle. Upon forming, the beetle wasn't white, but rather, bright red. It was fully 3,000 meters long, and covered with countless vicious spikes that emanated the black glow of deadly poison. After forming, the enormous beetle let out a terrifying screech that caused numerous cultivators to cough up mouthfuls of blood. That included cultivators from the Sky River Court as well as the river-defying sect. The terrifyingly ferocious nature of this beetle cast cold shock into the hearts of all present. Even Bai Xiaochun was trembling at the sight of the beetle. Despite his recent step into core formation, the beetle's aura left him shaking in utter terror. A death beetle, one of the Sky River Court's 2 reserve powers. A death beetle. The numerous nascent soul cultivators of the river-defying sect were visibly taken aback. Frigid Sect and Master Godwind exchanged a look, and each could see the serious expressions on the other's faces. After letting out a powerful roar, the beetle lunged forward, spitting out a huge stream of green fluid that sprayed about like rainwater. Everything it touched began to dissolve, even the ground. Instantly, miserable cries began to ring out. Even the Sky River Court cultivators were being affected. The corrosive power of the acid raid went far beyond anything Bai Xiaochun had created in his pill concocting. Terrified, he began to back up. What is that freakish thing? Even as everyone was reeling in shock, the death beetle burst into motion, sending a shower of spikes out in all directions. Then, it opened its mouth, snatched up a core formation cultivator and swallowed him down. Next, it landed hard on the ground, where it curled up into a ball and began to roll about, crushing everything in its path into a bloody pulp. Not even attacks from the nascent soul cultivators could do anything to hinder its path. Even when some particularly powerful attacks were successful, the huge bug would simply break up into countless smaller white insects, then reform moments later. Inside the log cabin, the boy began to clap his hands slowly. Smiling, he said, "Ah, a death beetle. An excellent mid-grade spirit treasure." The old man didn't respond. This river-defying sect has quite a few reserve powers at their disposal, but they're all mortal-tier spirit treasures. Although, they do have that extraordinary blood ancestor of theirs. What a pity that the patriarchs issued orders not to touch it. The boy shook his head sadly. "I did hear that their spirit stream division has a very mysterious origin. Perhaps they have a spirit treasure that can broaden our horizons?" The boy was only getting more interested by what was happening. As he looked out at the battlefield, the death beetle was smashing back and forth, inflicting serious damage on the river-defying sect. If the situation wasn't resolved, the deaths involved would be serious. The patriarchs of the river-defying sect all looked over at Frigid Sect. Master Godwin sounded quite anxious as he said, "Brother Frigid Sect, didn't you say that you would take care of the death beetle?" Frigid Sect hesitated for a moment. Then he looked at the huge beetle and gritted his teeth. Without saying a word, he shot through the air toward the Spirit Stream Division's Heavenspan battleship out on the river. After 10 breaths of time passed, the death beetle spat out another rain of acid and sent another wave of spikes shooting out. More screams echoed out, despite how the nascent soul cultivators of the river-defying sect were doing their best to block the attacks. That was when a shocking aura suddenly rose up from the river, specifically, from the Spirit Stream Division's Heavenspan battleship. In response to the aura, the death beetle shivered. It wasn't the only one. All cultivators on the battlefield, from the chi condensation stage to nascent soul, were shaking uncontrollably. Their faces began to fall, and their cultivation bases began to spin out of control. Even the boy in the log cabin was visibly shocked. Then, a look of unprecedented solemnity appeared on his face as he looked over at the Heavenspan battleship. The old man's face fell, and a look of complete incredulity appeared on his face. A high-grade spirit treasure? Somewhere on the battlefield was Gongsun Wanner, who moments ago had worn a carefree expression on her face. Suddenly, she stopped in place, and a mysterious gleam rose up in her eyes as she looked over at the Heavenspan battleship. The entire battlefield went still. Even the dire Skybanyan, which up to this moment had been continuously attempting to free itself from the grip of the blood ancestor, suddenly stopped moving. In the Heavenspan battleship, in a heavily guarded secret chamber, Frigid Sect was kneeling down in front of a coffin. Inside of the coffin was the corpse of a baby girl, whose eyes had just opened. The terrifying aura that had just appeared came in the moment that she opened her eyes. Trembling, Frigid Sect raised his voice and said, "True Spirit, please exterminate this death beetle." The instant the words left his mouth, the corpse of the baby girl vanished from within the coffin. When she reappeared, she was in the air above the Heavenspan battleship, except now, she looked like a young woman. The baby girl hovered there looking like a young woman, silently looking up into the sky, an expression of confused curiosity in her eyes, almost as if she were thinking about the past. As she floated there silently, all eyes were focused upon her. Everyone felt their hearts and minds trembling, and were filled with the urge to drop down and worship. As for the boy in the log cabin, he was shaking visibly. That's. A look of complete and utter disbelief filled his face. The boy wasn't the only one to react in such a way. The old man's eyes shone with strange light as he stood there panting. Outside of the Sky River Court headquarters, the 3 observers from the other sects all had looks of complete shock on their faces. "Who is that? Her aura, I've never felt so shaken, not even when facing a diva-level patriarch. Who could ever have imagined that the river-defying sect would have reserve powers like this?" Even the other 3 divisions of the river-defying sect were completely and utterly shocked. Master Godwin's eyes were wide as he was yet again impressed with how well the Spirit Stream Division kept their true strength hidden. Never in all eternity could he have imagined that they would have power such as this at their disposal. Bai Xiaochun's eyes were wide as he looked at the baby girl. Although there were other people who might know more about the girl than he did, he still was more familiar with her than most. In fact, back when he'd laid eyes on her for the first time, he'd even heard her voice. Now that the baby girl had emerged from the coffin, allowing Bai Xiaochun to directly sense the indescribably terrifying fluctuations rolling off of her, he couldn't help but pant. All of this takes a bit of time to describe, but from the moment she opened her eyes until the instant she appeared in midair, only the briefest of moments passed. Before anyone could even react, the baby girl looked away from the sky, taking in everyone in the world with her gaze, including the enormous beetle. Then she simply lifted her hand and pointed at the bug. In that instant, the death beetle began to shiver, and then seemed to lose any ability to fight back. No one could even see any ripples of a magical technique, and yet, the death beetle began to shake violently. A moment later, the beetle was nothing more than ash dissolving in the air. The wave of the baby girl's finger had stirred natural law, and completely wiped the beetle out of existence. The response to the scene which had just played out was complete silence. The eyes of the river-defying sect cultivators were wide, and the Sky River Court cultivators' minds were reeling. Bai Xiaochun hovered there in midair, eyes wide with shock. He had just witnessed something that no one else had noticed. With the power of his Heaven Dao Gold Core, he had noticed that the wave of the baby girl's finger had caused a vibration on something that looked like a thin thread. That slight fluctuation gave rise to transformations that he didn't understand, but the result was that the death beetle was blotted out of existence. What had just occurred was something that could not be explained with an understanding of magical techniques and divine abilities. As for the three people from the other sects, their scalps were tingling, and they were shaking visibly. In fact, they weren't even capable of imagining what kind of power could simply wipe away a mid-grade spirit treasure like that death beetle. However, they could imagine what would happen if that power were turned upon them. They would be instantly turned into nothing more than ash. Back in the Sky River Court, the young boy gasped and murmured, "A foreigner. I can't believe the Spirit Stream Division has a foreigner." The look in his eyes as he observed that baby girl couldn't have been more serious. The old man suddenly chuckled. Foreigners are inauspicious. Everyone knows that. Furthermore, any sect that has dealings with foreigners also becomes polluted and inauspicious. A gleam of anticipation could be seen deep within the old man's eyes. The boy maintained his silence. He was one of the 5 devas of the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect, and had a very profound understanding of the world around him. He was well aware that foreigners truly were incredibly inauspicious. However, at the same time, the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect's stance toward them was to stay hands-off and simply ignore them. Damn, thought the boy. There must be someone very powerful in the Spirit Stream Division. The point of revealing that foreigner wasn't just to kill the death beetle, it was to put on a little show for me. Well, I can do the same thing. Gaze flickering across the battlefield, he suddenly performed an incantation gesture with his right hand, then pushed his hand down onto the tree trunk next to him. The old man's face fell as if he wished to stop the boy, and yet was unable to. Almost as soon as the boy pushed down onto the tree trunk, the ancient dire sky banyan that was the home of the Sky River Court suddenly surged with life force, and began to struggle mightily. Powerful roaring could be heard as countless branches flew out onto the battlefield and began to wrap around the Sky River Court cultivators, even the nascent soul experts. Then the branches lurched back, dragging the cultivators into the dire sky banyan. As the cultivators were swallowed up, they became nutrients for the dire sky banyan, causing its life force to surge. That in turn caused the enormous palm print on the dire sky banyan's trunk to heal up. Countless branches spread out over it, and leaves sprouted. More intense roars could be heard, and then the enormous tree jerked, snapping the 2 main branches which had been pinned down by the blood ancestor. With that, the gigantic tree reared up to its full height. The tree let out a bellow that shook heaven and earth, and then, its eyes opened, bright red eyes which stared at the baby girl up in the air. The baby girl only had 10 breaths of time to be awake. Although everything almost seemed to be happening in slow motion, the truth was that those 10 breaths of time still hadn't passed yet, only about 8 or 9. The baby girl was already starting to wither up, and the light was fading from her eyes. And yet, she didn't even bother to glance at the roaring tree. Instead, she turned her head to look at the shocked Bai Xiaochun. Bai Xiaochun's mind instantly began to spin as a familiar yet mysterious voice spoke to him. I'll give you a bit of my qi and blood. I hope that you can concoct the river-defying pill sooner rather than later. The baby girl waved her right index finger, and a drop of blood flew out of the tip, which shot with lightning-like speed toward Bai Xiaochun's forehead. In the blink of an eye, it had fused into him. Having accomplished this, the baby girl vanished. A moment later, she reappeared back inside of the Heavenspan battleship, in the coffin, her eyes closed, once again nothing but a desiccated corpse. A tremor ran through Bai Xiaochun, and his qi and blood began to seethe. That drop of blood which had just been absorbed into his body apparently contained boundless power. As the power spread out, Bai Xiaochun let out a long, piercing cry. At the same time, 9 asuras appeared behind him. Then, with the stimulation of the blood drop, a 10th asura came into being. As the 10th asura appeared, Bai Xiaochun's eyes turned bright red. Throwing his head back, he let out a howl that caused heaven and earth to shake. Everyone in the river-defying sect was completely shocked. His fleshly body power instantly began to rocket up, and he suddenly felt as if he were pushing against the second shackle. It seemed that just a bit more power would break through it. Undying Heavenly King body. Blue veins bulged out on his face and neck as a shockwave blasted out from him. At the same time, the 10 asuras behind him began to merge together. When they became one, a terrifying fleshly body power instantly exploded out of Bai Xiaochun. Bursts of golden light shone out from the single asura as golden armor fell down upon it. Its physical appearance was changing rapidly. No longer did it have 3 heads and 6 arms. It was now an enraged heavenly king, enormous, fully 300 meters tall. It was an undying heavenly king. 1. There are many different versions of what the heavenly kings look like. Here is one depiction of the famous 4 heavenly kings of Buddhism. The appearance of the undying heavenly king indicated that Bai Xiaochun was finally breaking through the second shackle. As he did, he threw his head back and roared. He suddenly felt freer. His fleshly body power was skyrocketing, and at the same time, something became visible inside of the projection of the undying heavenly king. It was a golden core. It was none other than an undying heavenly king core. Bai Xiaochun took a deep breath, causing the undying heavenly king and the core within it to fly toward him. In the blink of an eye, it merged into him, causing an energy that was even more terrifying than before to explode out. That was the power of 2 cores. At the same time, the drop of blood from the baby girl instantly gave Bai Xiaochun deeper enlightenment of the river-defying pill. As of this moment, he had new ideas, and was slightly more confident in being able to concoct the pill. Meanwhile, the dire sky banyan was still rising up into the air, and countless river-defying sect cultivators were fleeing from it at top speed. As for the cultivators of the bloodstream division, they were following the directions of Master Godwin to head back toward the blood ancestor. Although everyone was shaken by what was happening with Bai Xiaochun, there was no time to ponder the situation. Master Godwin immediately roared, "Night Crypt, my boy, take control of the blood ancestor. Kill that dire sky banyan." It was a critical juncture. In order to test out the true spirit, the young boy gave new life to the dire sky banyan, which had previously been panting on the verge of death. However, the price which had been paid was enormous: the lives of all of the cultivators of the Sky River Court. It was an unforeseen turn of events that caught the river-defying sect unprepared. According to any estimation, after the death beetle was destroyed, the Sky River Court should have surrendered. After all, the death of that beetle was supposed to signify the end of the punishment. But now everything had changed. The dire sky banyan roared as its enormous frame rose up over the heavenspan river. Countless roots were connected to either side of the river bank, making it look almost like a giant. Outside of the log cabin, the boy frowned. He didn't care at all about the deaths of the Sky River Court, nor about what the river-defying sect was doing. He only cared about that baby girl. So, she can only remain active for 10 breaths of time, huh? The boy shook his head sadly. After a moment, a look of sadness appeared in the eyes of the old man, and even pain. He almost seemed to be hesitating over some decision. As for all of the other cultivator clans and sects that had come to observe the fighting, they were completely shaken by what they had seen, and could hardly control their own breathing. That was especially true considering that they had seen the powerful death beetle wiped out with the single wave of a finger. Then the dire sky banyan suddenly surged with life force. Everyone began to back up, trembling. Most of the river-defying sect cultivators had managed to flee successfully. Although a few had been wounded or killed in the process, most were now back in the heavenspan battleships, whose shields had been raised. As for the bloodstream division, most of them were on the banks of the river. Bai Xiaochun had no time to think about the matter at the moment. He was surging with incredible power, and his skin was the color of gold. The feeling of being at the peak of the undying skin and undying flesh left him with the sensation that he could hurl mountains and drain seas. As soon as Master Godwin called out to him, he blurred into motion. He could now move even more quickly than when he had just stepped into the Heaven Dao Gold Core stage. Although the waters of the Heavenspan River were very dangerous to most people, they wouldn't harm Bai Xiaochun at all. Thus, he dove into the water and shot downward toward the blood ancestor. It only took a few breaths of time before the blood ancestor's eyes opened and began to shine with golden light. Slowly but surely, the blood ancestor rose to his feet. Before, something like this wouldn't have been possible. Bai Xiaochun needed the combined strength of countless other bloodstream division cultivators to take control of the blood ancestor. But now, with effort, he was able to do it single-handedly. As the blood ancestor rose up from within the waters of the Heavenspan River, the bloodstream division cultivators flew into the air and quickly disappeared inside. Then, the blood ancestor began to radiate even more incredible power than last time. Under the control of Bai Xiaochun, the blood-colored giant leapt up into the air. It was in that moment that the dire skybanyan turned its gaze to the blood ancestor. Hatred and animosity burned inside of it as it sent countless branches and vines swirling together to form a huge hand, which then shot toward the blood ancestor in the form of a fist. Instead of retreating in the face of such an attack, the blood ancestor continued to fly through the air, even higher than last time. In a flash, he appeared directly in front of the dire skybanyan, whereupon he reached out and grabbed a hold of the incoming hand, then unleashed the mountain-shaking bash. Boundless golden light glittered as the blood ancestor bashed into the dire skybanyan, ripping it up by the roots and sending it flying backward several thousand meters. Everyone who was watching could scarcely believe their own eyes. The events which were playing out this day completely surpassed the imaginations of anyone present, to the point where they almost felt as if they were suffocating. The blood ancestor and the dire skybanyan were both gargantuan giants, large enough to be the headquarters of a huge sect. And here they were fighting at close quarters. Each blow unleashed contained the power to destroy heaven and earth. Shockwaves blasted out in all directions, sending earth and vegetation flying everywhere. Even the waters of the Heavenspan River were affected. The giant and the tree fought back and forth relentlessly across the landscape, felling mountains and hewing massive craters into the earth. Of course, the dire skybanyan hadn't truly recovered, it had only been aided by being fed the life force of the entire Sky River court. The tree had long since been doomed to die. Considering the intensity of the fighting, it wouldn't be long before its injuries flared out of control, and it slipped away into death. The enormous tree let out roars of rage as it was battered backward and backward. Because of the unrelenting attacks of the blood ancestor, the dire skybanyan was unable to seize the initiative. Bai Xiaochun had already become very comfortable in his control over the gigantic body. His Heaven Dao Gold core surged with energy, releasing constant power. His Undying Heavenly King core also seethed, unleashing boundless fleshly body power. With the increase of his cultivation base, Bai Xiaochun could also send his consciousness to greater limits. His mind now filled the blood ancestor, and at the same time, his fleshly body formed a resonance, giving him an unheard of level of control. Sometimes, he even forgot that he was actually inside of the blood ancestor. It was almost as if he truly were the blood ancestor. Die, he howled. However, his voice came out of the blood ancestor's mouth, rumbling like thunder. The dire skybanyan was shoved backward again, and yet, before it could get very far, Bai Xiaochun reached out and grabbed it by the arm, flinging it through the air. The dire skybanyan slammed into the ground some distance away, then struggled to rise up again. Meanwhile, the log cabin inside the huge tree hadn't been affected at all. The boy still stood outside of it, a thoughtful expression on his face. As for the old man, a look of determination had finally solidified in his eyes. Taking a deep breath, he reached out and pushed his hand down onto the trunk of the tree. In that instant, his body withered, and a powerful aura of death completely surrounded him. The boy looked over at him. "Fellow Taoist," he said coolly, "please pardon my actions from moments ago. I got caught up in the heat of the moment, and my desire to interact with that foreigner. That was unfair to you, and it also made things hard for the river-defying sect. Ah well, if this is the choice you wish to make, so be it. With new life breathed into the skybanyan, your mark will be left behind for all time. It will also serve as a bit of recompense to the river-defying sect on my part." With that, he waved his sleeve behind him, stepped out into the air, and vanished. The old man didn't say anything when the boy disappeared. He looked at the huge struggling Trent, and at the same time, his body withered. Everyone in the Sky River court was dead, and he didn't have much longer to live either. Therefore, he was choosing to sacrifice himself to give the dire skybanyan a chance to live. At the same time, some of his own will and life force would remain behind within the tree. Henceforth, he murmured, "I acknowledge allegiance to the river-defying sect. I will protect it, just as you protected the Sky River court." With that, he withered up, fusing into the dire skybanyan. The dire skybanyan shivered, and then the red glow in its eyes faded away. Even as that happened, the blood ancestor sailed toward it, fist held back in preparation to launch a blow. That was when the dire skybanyan prostrated itself and said in a deep voice, "I acknowledge allegiance." Even as the words echoed out, a scintillating light flew out from inside of the huge tree. The light shrank down until it revealed a green crystal, which was the heart of the dire skybanyan. Whoever controlled that crystal would have the dire skybanyan's life in their hands. Under Bai Xiaochun's control, the blood ancestor stopped moving right in front of the dire sky banyan. Everything went silent, and all of the cultivators of the river-defying sect looked over at the blood ancestor. It wasn't just them. The surrounding cultivator clans and smaller sects were also waiting to see what the blood ancestor would do. No one could interfere. The choice was up to Bai Xiaochun. Not even the nascent soul patriarchs could do anything. Bai Xiaochun hesitated for a moment, then smiled and reached out to grab the green crystal. Instantly, a heaven-shaking, earth-shattering swell of cheering rose up from the 3 heaven-span battleships. Victory! From now on, our river-defying sect is a Middle Reaches sect. We won! We won! Within the cheering could be heard crying, whistling, and shouts of excitement. Everyone in the river-defying sect was boiling with elation. Moments later, a beam of bright light became visible, shooting through the sky. As it neared, a stone stele could be seen inside. The stone stele slammed into the ground, burying itself halfway into the earth. Visible on the top half were 3 characters. River-defying sect. Beneath those 3 characters was another smaller line of characters. Subdivision of the Starry Sky Tao Polarity sect. That stone stele was a sign of the approval of the Starry Sky Tao Polarity sect, and as soon as the cultivators of the river-defying sect saw it, their excitement grew even more intense. This was everything they had worked hard for, and at long last, they had confirmation. Many of them began to think back to all the fighting that had been involved in becoming a Middle Reaches sect, and it left them sighing. The surrounding cultivator clans and small-scale sects all began dropping to their knees to kowtow. Greetings, river-defying sect. More and more voices joined together, creating a cacophony of sound. As for the 3 representatives from the other sects, they took deep breaths as they recovered their composure. With a final look at the blood ancestor, they turned and left. Everyone knew that from this day on, the eastern Middle Reaches was no longer controlled by the Sky River Court, but rather, the honorable river-defying sect. The river-defying sect had taken control over the Middle Reaches. All of the cultivator clans and smaller sects were completely shaken, as were the representatives of the 3 other major sects. The entire structure of the Middle Reaches would change, and it also meant that one of the 4 major overlords had been replaced. That was even more meaningful considering that the river-defying sect had come from the lower reaches. To the sects subservient to the other 3 major sects, new doors had suddenly been opened. At the same time, the river-defying sect was now busier than it had ever been before. Regardless of the level of their cultivation bases, the disciples of all 4 divisions were mobilized to aid in the construction of a new sect headquarters. That new river-defying sect headquarters was being built on the former location of the Sky River Court itself. The patriarchs of the 4 divisions had long since discussed and come to an agreement regarding how it would be laid out and what it would look like. Not only did their plan fulfill the requirements of each of the 4 divisions, it put the sect in the perfect position to both defend and attack. After all, this new headquarters would need to stand for thousands upon thousands of years, and would be a source of glory and honor for the entire sect. The nucleus of the headquarters was to be an enormous mountain, half of which rested beneath the surface of the Heavenspan River, and the other half of which rose high into the heavens. Although one might think that such a mountain would impede the flow of the Heavenspan River water, various magical means would be used to ensure that the river continued to flow just as before. The mountain would stretch high into the clouds, so tall that it was impossible to see the summit. As for the name of the mountain, it would be called Mount River Defiance. That mountain would be the nucleus of the sect, where all the important decisions would be made. The patriarchs would live there, and the reserve powers would be held there as well. Mount River Defiance would form the center of the sect, with 4 majestic mountain ranges stretching out from it in 4 directions. Transported into the area by powerful magics, each one would stretch out for 500 kilometers, and would feature 8 peaks that, despite being impressively tall, did not rival Mount River Defiance. Those 4 mountain ranges would be assigned to the 4 divisions of the river-defying sect, the Spirit, Blood, Profound, and Pillstream divisions. The main gate of the river-defying sect would face the Heavenspan River, and would be guarded by 2 enormous figures. On the left there would be a towering giant that thrummed with powerful blood chi, and yet appeared to be sleeping, which would be none other than the blood ancestor. On the right side would be the dire Skybanyan, standing guard over the river-defying sect just like the giant. The towering tree and the enormous giant would cause all other smaller sects in the Middle Reaches to cower in fear and terror. The planned layout of the river-defying sect seemed simple, but the truth was that much thought had been put into it. For example, a grand spell formation would be erected to defend the sect, a spell formation that was 10 times larger than the one the Spirit Stream sect had created years ago in the Luokan Mountains. This was the type of enormous sect that deserved to occupy the middle reaches, a sect that was clearly so powerful that none of the other forces in the region would dare to trifle with it. The river-defying sect sent emissaries back to the lower reaches with new regulations for the 4 sects which had risen up in their absence. The old customs were reinstated. In the past, the 4 great sects of the lower reaches had sent tribute upriver every year. The same arrangement would continue into the future. The river-defying sect also locked down the borders of the lower reaches, ensuring that the new sects would have time to fully establish themselves and not face any outside invaders. While the shocking memory of the destruction of the Sky River Court was still fresh in the minds of all, this first dharmic decree issued by the river-defying sect was something that no one was willing to defy, not even the other 3 major middle reaches sects. No one wanted to incur the ill will of the river-defying sect. Although the river-defying sect was weaker than the other 3 major sects, they had received approval from the presiding sect upriver. As such, the other sects couldn't very well offend them before they even had a chance to establish themselves. Because of that, the river-defying sect's territory was peaceful and calm, although the population was filled with both excitement and nervousness. The river-defying sect had many important affairs to attend to. Whether it was the construction of their new headquarters, the pacification of the lower reaches, or the task of bringing their new territory under control, there were countless tasks that required careful attention. The first matter to take care of was to assign a mountain range to each of the 4 divisions. Once each division had a mountain range, they could go about setting it up according to their own styles and requirements. Because of Bai Xiaochun, the Spirit Stream division took the East Mountain Range. There were few changes to their division. The same 7 mountain peaks remained that had once been on the north and south banks of the river. The only difference was that the 8th mountain now belonged to the core formation cultivators. The mountain range occupied by the Bloodstream division was the one closest to the Blood Ancestor, which would ensure that the cultivators there were able to practice their techniques with the least interference possible. Another new rule was instituted: in order to become a Blood Master of one of their 8 mountain peaks, a cultivator had to reach core formation first. As for the Profound and Pillstream divisions, they had similar rules as before. The Profound Stream division specialized in spell formations and clone cultivation, whereas the Pillstream division focused on the Tao of medicine. When all was said and done, the river-defying sect had a strong foundation in virtually all aspects. They truly met the requirements for a large sect. The construction efforts all proceeded with great fanfare. There was also much work to be done on what had once been the battlefield surrounding the Sky River Court. The corpses of many river-defying sect cultivators who had died in battle needed to be cleared away. Those cultivators were given proper burials, and their names were inscribed to be remembered for all time. They were brave heroes of the river-defying sect whose names would be sung in songs for generation to come. There were many, many tasks to accomplish. Now that the fighting was done, one of the main matters at hand was to select a new sect leader. Thankfully, such matters were the responsibility of the patriarchs. Bai Xiaochun didn't have to worry about them. Days passed, and soon Bai Xiaochun realized that everyone around him was busy in some way or another. Whenever he walked around, the disciples of the river-defying sect would cast reverent gazes in his direction, and offer formal greetings. At first, it felt wonderful, but soon, the thrill began to fade. "This is so boring," he murmured. "I think I'll go chat with Xiaomei." It took a bit of searching, but he soon found her. She was with a team of fellow cultivators operating a spell formation giant to clear away rubble. As soon as he saw her, he called out, "Xiaomei, don't bother me now, big bro Xiaochun," she called out, wiping the sweat from her brow. "I'm busy." With that, she continued on with her work. Bai Xiaochun stood there awkwardly for a moment before catching sight of Big Fatty Zhang. "Eldest brother." Big Fatty Zhang looked over with a serious expression, then said, "Can you save it for later, Xiaochun? I have a bunch of spirit enhancing to do." With that, he went back to his work with Shu Meixiang and the other spirit enhancers. Bai Xiaochun smiled, but inside he felt embarrassed and even crestfallen. Just when he was about to leave, he noticed Hu Yunfei flying in his direction. "Big bro Hu, no time to chat, Xiaochun. Master sent me to work on the magic pavilion." Hu Yunfei flew by without even stopping. Smiling wryly, Bai Xiaochun looked around at the people bustling about, and then decided to head to the Bloodstream division. As soon as he set foot on the mountains, he saw Song Junwan commanding a group of Middle Peak disciples as they constructed a new Middle Peak. "Big sis Song, go hang out somewhere else, Night Crypt," she barked, flicking her sleeve. Then she issued some more orders to the Middle Peak disciples. Bai Xiaochun's jaw dropped. Even as he was trying to decide how to respond, a quavering voice reached his ears from behind. Junior Patriarch, do you mind just leaving? You're making me nervous. Bai Xiaochun felt like he was about to go mad. Sighing, he turned and moped off. Everyone he knew was ignoring him because of the various tasks they had been assigned. Even Bruiser had been given an assignment and was overseeing some of the battle beasts. Bai Xiaochun felt like he was the only idle person in the entire river-defying sect. The only people who qualified to give him orders were the nascent soul patriarchs, and they were all busy with important matters. In fact, it was even possible to occasionally catch wind of the sounds of arguing and discussion coming from Mount River Defiance. The elites usually do the most work, but apparently a person as incredible as me, a junior patriarch, actually ends up with nothing to do. Completely incapable of thinking of any important tasks to attend to, he could only sigh. Ah, whatever. I guess I should go concoct some medicine. After finding his way to the bank of the Heavenspan River, he found a good location, sat down cross-legged, and began to think back to what he had learned from the true spirit about the river-defying pill. She gave me some good fortune, so I should definitely try to concoct that pill. Gradually, he sank down into the calm that came with seeking enlightenment, and began to analyze the formula for the river-defying pill. Time passed. Soon, night had fallen. Although the river-defying sect cultivators were all very busy, it was customary to rest at night, so soon, all heaven and earth grew quiet. Most of the corpses on the battlefield had been cleared away, although a few remained here and there. At the moment, the moon hung high in the sky, illuminating all of the lands down below. But then, a dark cloud appeared, which slowly spread out, casting darkness everywhere. Then, a white-robed figure appeared out of thin air. Heaven and earth were nothing but a vast swath of darkness. As the white-robed figure appeared, a sinister coldness swept out. Because of the darkness which surrounded the figure, it was only just barely possible to identify her as a woman. Her long hair flowed about her as she strolled across the battlefield through the darkness of night. Wherever she went, everything around her grew so cold it seemed to hover on the verge of becoming ice. The plants and vegetation withered as though the white-robed woman was sucking away their life force. At the same time, her own life force rapidly grew stronger. Before long, she was next to a pile of corpses belonging to former cultivators of the Sky River Court. Looking down at them, she chuckled, then sucked in a breath which caused the corpses to begin to wither up. In the briefest of moments, the corpses became nothing more than skeletons that looked like they had been dead for years. The young woman didn't stop there. She proceeded along through the battlefield, causing numerous corpses to transform into skeletons. As this occurred, her body grew increasingly distinct. In the end, she stretched her neck a bit to loosen it, then floated over to another location where a large amount of Sky River Court cultivators' corpses lay. This location belonged to the Bloodstream Division, and these corpses had been set aside for them to use in their corpse refining. The entire area was sealed tight with spell formations, and yet, they posed no obstacle to the young woman. She floated right through them until she was right above the corpses. Then, a strange gleam could be seen in her eyes as she yet again breathed in deeply. Instantly, the vast quantity of corpses began to wither. In the blink of an eye, the more than 10,000 corpses turned into nothing more than bones. Some of those bones even dissolved into ashes. By this point, the young woman's features were even clearer. After a moment passed, she burped lightly, then slowly looked up into the sky. The dark clouds began to fade away, and a shaft of moonlight fell down to reveal her face. Shockingly, that young woman was Gongsun Wanner. Well, I'm not starving anymore, but what a pity that they were all dead. If only I could eat something living. Covering her mouth, she chuckled, then turned and vanished into thin air. With her departure, the dark clouds disappeared completely, allowing the moonlight to shine down onto a field of pale white bones. No one detected Gongsun Wanner that night, not even the nascent soul patriarchs. Bai Xiaochun suddenly sneezed as a cold feeling swept over him. Emerging from his meditative trance, he looked around for a moment, then, after seeing nothing out of the ordinary, closed his eyes again. The next morning at dawn, the disciples responsible for the corpses suddenly realized that the corpses were now nothing more than dried-up bones. Their jaws dropped, and soon cries of alarm rose up into the air. The matter instantly caused a huge stir in the river-defying sect. What could have happened? Heavens, how could all the corpses here have dried up overnight? There's not even any flesh or blood left at all. They look like they've been dead for ages. They definitely didn't look like that yesterday. As the news spread, everyone was completely and utterly shaken. Even the patriarch's meeting regarding the sect rules was thrown into chaos. Bai Xiaochun was eventually disturbed by the racket, and quickly went to see what was going on. As he hovered in the air, he heard the various discussions, and then looked over at the corpses on the battlefield. What happened? He thought, shocked. The fact that all of the flesh and blood had vanished from the corpses left him with a very bad feeling. It was in that exact moment that more than 10 beams of light shot off of Mount River Defiance. It was the patriarchs of the 4 divisions, who had very serious expressions on their faces as they sped in the direction of the Bloodstream Division's corpse refining district. Behind them were a large number of core formation cultivators. Seeing what was happening, Bai Xiaochun quickly flew up to join them. A large group of cultivators had already gathered in the area and were discussing the situation. When they saw the patriarchs and the core formation experts, they quickly quieted down. However, curious expressions could be seen on their faces. They could tell that the events of the previous night were clearly no small matter. Obviously, the fact that the corpse's flesh and blood had been drained away meant that someone or something had done the deed. If that news spread, it could definitely cause problems. The nascent soul patriarchs soon arrived at the corpse refining district and began to investigate. Before long, their expressions began to flicker. That was especially true of the 3 most powerful of the patriarchs, the Great Circle nascent soul experts Frigid Sect, Master Godwind, and Crimson Soul. They could sense a lingering aura in the area that caused their expressions to turn very grim. After exchanging glances, Master Godwind of the Bloodstream Division said, when the dire sky banyan was uprooted, it created rifts for earth chi to seep through. That's what caused this event. There's no need for anyone to panic. I'll set up some spell formations to keep the earth chi sealed. Next, Frigid Sect and Crimson Soul also made similar statements. Considering their reputations in the sect, such words quickly eased the hearts of most of the disciples. However, Bai Xiaochun wasn't too far off from the nascent soul cultivators, and when he looked around, he instantly sensed the cold aura in the area. There were even streams of frigid chi which entered his body and caused his life force to grow sluggish. He didn't quite believe the patriarch's explanation, but hesitated for a moment and looked over at Frigid Sect. Frigid Sect gave him a meaningful look that indicated he should hold his tongue. The matter was quickly swept under the rug. All 4 divisions entrusted key disciples to guide the flow of conversation in the sect. This, coupled with the fact that everyone was so busy, and that no living cultivators had been affected, ensured that discussion of the matter faded away quickly. Although a few people harbored some suspicions, no one attempted to dig for more information. However, that very night, there was a secret meeting on Mount River Defiance between the patriarchs and the core formation cultivators. Bai Xiaochun was present. Master Godwind of the Bloodstream Division looked over the gathered core formation cultivators, then slowly began to explain. The strangest thing is that none of us patriarchs detected anything unusual during last night's odd events. Those corpses were completely drained of all flesh and blood, and although they didn't contain any true life force, they would have contained other strange powers. Even more odd was that the corpses originally had a strong aura of death. However, my inspections earlier didn't reveal even a trace of such an aura. The only aura remaining in the area was something extremely sinister, something akin to the power of the 9 Serenities underworld. I can only hope that we patriarchs' conclusion in the matter is not mistaken. From what we could tell, something visited the river-defying sect last night, something that shouldn't even exist in the world of the living, the powerful ghost of some dead entity. Only the ghosts of the dead thrive on auras of death. Furthermore, after reaching a certain level of power, such ghosts require life force from living beings. Considering that Master Godwind was a nascent soul Taoist master, everyone simply listened to his words and took them to heart. The core formation cultivators were completely shocked. As for Bai Xiaochun, his face drained of blood. A ghost, he thought, shivering, his hair standing on end. It was Patriarch Crimson Soul who spoke next, his voice hoarse, a strange light gleaming in his eyes. There isn't any need for anxiety. We're giving you this information so that you can be on guard. The other patriarchs and I will set up an airtight spell formation. If that ghost appears again, we'll make sure it is completely destroyed. As his gaze swept over the core formation cultivators, it lingered for a moment on Bai Xiaochun, who was currently trembling and scowling on the verge of tears. It was with complete and utter terror that Bai Xiaochun left Mount River Defiance. His thoughts were in utter chaos, and he couldn't stop thinking about how he had suddenly been dragged out of meditation the previous night. At that point, his skin began to crawl. Don't tell me that some unclean thing was out looking for me last night. Having reached this point in his train of thought, Bai Xiaochun almost screamed. Not daring to return to the place he had been concocting pills the previous day, he decided to stay on Mount River Defiance. As far as he was concerned, staying close to the patriarchs would obviously be the safest thing to do. Because he was the junior patriarch of the sect, he was able to lay claim to a small area of his own on Mount River Defiance, where he personally dug out a simple immortals cave. Then he thought about the unclean thing from the previous night, and again, his skin began to crawl. Gritting his teeth, he went to find some profound stream division disciples to help him set up some defensive spell formations. Most cultivators in the sect would be content with one spell formation, but Bai Xiaochun was terrified at the moment, so he tracked down dozens of top experts from the profound stream division. With their help, he set up dozens of spell formations, most of them designed to ward off evil spirits. The experts from the profound stream sect had very odd expressions on their faces when they left. And yet, Bai Xiaochun still didn't feel safe. Gritting his teeth, he spent a huge sum of merit points to purchase a vast quantity of paper talismans, most of them designed to ward off or suppress evil spirits. After plastering so many talismans onto himself that he looked like a boiled sticky rice dumpling, he finally felt at ease. Humph, that unclean thing won't dare to cause trouble for me now. I'm close to the patriarchs, I have tons of spell formations set up, and all kinds of talismans ready. I refuse to believe that ghost would set foot in my direction. Breathing a sigh of relief, he strolled out of the front door of his immortals cave. Thus, this episode comes to an end. Remember to like and comment so we can discuss the story together. Until we meet again in the next chapters.